All right, I'm going to call the meeting to order and we'll start off with roll call. We don't have Charlotte Ford or Lisa Herm. Aaron Lau. Here. Taryn Malavit Bab. Here. Elizabeth McCabe.
Here.
Paul O'Rourke.
Here.
John Reagan. Here. Brooke Webb.
Here.
And as our staff liaison tonight, Jeff Bilek. Here. Andrew Flynn. Here. And Mike Haberman. Here. Aaron Lau. Yes. Yep. Right. So first agenda item is meeting minutes. I don't believe we received meeting minutes.
Oh, I'm sorry, they were in the folder.
Oh, the folder. Okay. Well, does anyone have a chance to review
I
the folder?
still couldn't find them. I must have looked in the wrong folder.
They should have been in October's folder for tonight's meeting. So I apologize if that was confusing to y'all. And I did not send out an email.
Yeah, I don't get into that folder often. Did anyone have a chance to review them? I don't think so. Can we table those for the next meeting? All right, we need to make a motion to do that, or we'll table the minutes to the next meeting. Let's start with citizens' comments. So just a reminder for folks, you're limited to 5 minutes. Please state your name and address. And we have one in the room. Do we have any online for citizens' comments? Looks like we do. All right, we'll start within the room and then we will go to the folks online. This is Susanna Ashwell. Okay, come on to the front, Susanna.
Hi, good evening. My name is Susanna Ashwell and I live at 308 Hazel Drive. I'm the parent of 2 children who attend Washington Elementary School, and a few of us parents from Washington Elementary have been talking about some safety issues recently, mainly regarding traffic, because we feel that some drivers are very, very careless, especially during drop-off and pickup. When they're supposed to drive slow, we see a decent bit of irresponsibility and it worries us. Even though my children don't personally cross Washington Road, there are a lot of people whose children do, and they as well are very concerned. So we were wondering together if it would be at all possible to have police presence at the school during drop-off and pickup. I don't know if this is something that could be done, but we just wanted to voice this concern and see if the resources are there or if the willingness would be there, because we feel that it would really help. We all know how when we drive on the highway and we know there's a speed trap, everybody slows down because they know that if there is a police vehicle, if there is police presence, we all drive more carefully. So we feel that we would benefit from this. And in fact, a few years ago, I witnessed a child be hit who was walking on the uptown to Washington Elementary. It was my son's classmate, and it was very traumatizing to see this because my child could have been crossing the street at that time, and it doesn't matter whose child it is. It's always very concerning when these things happen. And in fact, this driver drew right through a red light and hit this child. And I know it's been a few years, but I'm sure since then things have happened that are still equally concerning. So me, on behalf of other parents, would like to present this idea. And if it's at all possible to have police presence, then we would greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. No other public comment in the room. Looks like we have somebody with their hand raised online.
You go to participants. Yeah. And then go to attendees.
The top tab.
To the right.
A tab up there.
Right.
Yeah, I can't read it.
Above you.
Just up.
Just go below.
Yep, it's in the grayed
Down.
the grayed out areas.
There we go,
Yep.
right there.
And
Thank you.
then I think you have to, yeah.
Okay.
All right, please state your name and address, please.
Yeah, my name is Brent Wasco, and I live actually on 1480 Greenmount in Dormont. Please do not hold that against me. Thank you for having me. I believe there's a safety issue that on a road I use daily. It's Dell Avenue, the 200 block. It's between McFarland and Beverly. And the issue I have there is that parking is allowed on both sides of that road. And there's a fairly steep hill that crests in the middle of that road. So what ends up happening is because people are parking on both sides, typically multiple times you're traveling across it, you have to weave in between oncoming traffic. And because there's the hill, you can't see what's coming at you. There's a lack of sight distance. So I have seen multiple close calls. I have had multiple close calls. In my opinion, either traffic should be limited to just one side, or at the very least, traffic be restricted on the crest of the hill so that there's an adequate amount of time to stop before you get hit head on by an approaching vehicle.
Thank you, Brent. Dell Avenue is, I think this is the second meeting in a row that Dell Avenue has come up, and it's a well-known issue. Thank you for your comments. There are no, do we have any other public comments? Moving on to the chairperson's report. So just a reminder for folks, this is the week without driving, and that is something the municipality has co-sponsored. I believe other entities in the municipality have co-sponsored the effort, but for those that don't know, the week without driving is a nationwide movement to link the needs of disabled individuals and people of all ages with environmental movements and accessible community planning. The idea is to consider how someone without the option to drive would cope and what choices they would make in terms of driving. It's okay to drive, but just to put yourself in the shoes of those that may be non-drivers and how they move through that is important. We heard commentary tonight from those about Washington Elementary School. The school zones, and not that social media is a data source, a perfect data source, but there is a lot of commentary about our schools and a lot of dangerous movement at our schools. I myself and my children have had several. We go to Lincoln Elementary, several close calls in that intersection, crosswalks blocked at the corner of Ralston and Lincoln, or Ralston and Beverly almost every day. A lot of drivers making turning movements in conflict with people moving and children moving. So be cognizant of that. I don't know what the mobility board can do in terms of impelling the Mount Lebanon police to do more. I don't believe enforcement is our only answer, but I think in this moment right now, because of the issue, I would love to see more engaged enforcement, not around how people park in the go zone, but how people are entering and operating around our school zones. That means running red lights, speeding, blocking the crosswalks, making reckless movements. The RRFB, the reflective rectangular crossing at Washington Road, there's a lot of what would be known as double threats where folks do stop for that flashing light, but they use the alternative lane and the other vehicle may not stop. So there's some conflict there on a regular basis. So just, if anyone from the staff can speak to the ability for police enforcement or what can be requested from the mobility board, I'd love to know more. Mr. Wasco from Dormont brought up Dell Avenue. I think it's critical for the active transportation planning process that's going to start in the next couple of months, and maybe Commissioner Flynn can speak to where that process lives, but to look at these streets holistically. We are doing it jointly with Dormont. We can understand how that movement of Dell Avenue and between Dormont and Mount Lebanon works and what it connects to. I think in previous iterations, it has looked at connecting the business district of Dormont to the business district in Beverly, the shopping district, and how does that happen? We had a request about parking, so being not allowed on one side, there's traffic movements. It is a tighter right of way than some of our other ones, so the limitations of what we can do, there's going to be trade-offs. So just thinking about those, I think it really lives with the active transportation plan. So that's all I have, and I will pass it to the commission liaison.
Thank you. Nothing major to report from a commission perspective, at least not from a mobility perspective. We're going into budget season. So that is ramping up. Budget meetings are getting scheduled in on the calendar. So that will be, a long drawn out process. You're all welcome to come sit and listen to budget discussions where the sausage is well, maybe not made, but finalized. In terms of the active transportation planning, that is still ramping up, so nothing really to report there. I have not heard anything new, from staff on specific actions that are being taken at this point, but obviously we have engaged, the consultants, so that is a good step. Beyond that, haven't heard a lot. I mean, we do get on, occasional, concerns about, traffic speeds, those types of things, but nothing out of the ordinary.
And I don't know if Officer or Jeff, Officer Bialik has anything from the staff perspective. I know you're sort of sitting in for a couple folks, but. All right,
You're taking notes, I apologize.
no worries. With that, we will move to the subcommittee reports. Starting with capital budget.
We have nothing new to report for this session.
Okay. Move to, John, are you willing to take on the policy?
I suppose. We had one meeting with the policy subcommittee, going over the a draft for the citizen street improvement plan that I believe we've discussed several times at these meetings now. My takeaway from that meeting was that I think the other subcommittee members thought that the policy was ready to present to the board. I don't know if I was on the same page as them. I'm actually surprised no one asked the group, as the wider group, to take a look and in advance of this meeting. I think there are a few things. I'm sorry, I was not prepared. I think there are a few items where we need to it's not so much a matter of details, but a matter of overall strategy and how the thing actually would need to be structured. In particular, there were a few things in there that's I'm not sure Mount Lebanon has the ability to do that, much less grant citizens the ability to do that. So I went off on my own and I started doing research on state law and stuff, and I'm building a flow chart that I hope to share with everyone when it's a little more filled out. But I think that, to my opinion, is that to have a fleshed out policy, we need a little more, have a little better handle on the framework we're operating within. But that's just my take.
I think I'd like to see the policy subcommittee meet this month and kind of wrap up some of those outstanding issues and then provide it to the full board for review. Knowing that it's gonna have to go through a process beyond the subcommittees. Obviously, I'm sure the manager and solicitor and others would want to look at any policy. Commissioner Flynn, correct me if I'm wrong, but if the mobility board looks at it, we kind of get some edits through there, do those edits and then send it up through the chain of authority. I'd like to do that before the end of this calendar year, if not earlier, just to have it move through. But yeah, I want to get it right as well, John, to speak to those things. I know depending on where funding comes from, there are rules within the new federal funding structures where you essentially can get approval to use the best practice design manuals, such as the NACDO design manuals, and sort of override state authority to some effort based on but I can share that with the group. Basically, it's in federal law that if funding is provided through this discretionary funding, you can use these best practice guidelines. So there's more leeway than I think we need to wrestle with, but our solicitor and others can take a look and correct us if we're wrong and go from there. But that would be my part of the process. I'd like to see that subcommittee meet one more time, hash out those details, get it to review for the full board, and then start moving through the process.
Well,
In
and
leadership.
just as a kind of a point of reference. And I'm just thinking process, because your points are valid, right?
Yeah.
These are valid questions that I think do need to be vetted before commission ultimately votes on, adopting something.
Right.
What exactly we're adopting is a long ways away. So I would say draft the policy. If there are areas of concern or question, raise them, right? Make that part of your document. Again, you don't have to have all the answers, but having kind of the core intent established with kind of key areas of concern or question or, aspiration even, I think are completely valid to put forward as part of a, core proposal, because ultimately, right, the subcommittee is going to bring it here. This committee or this board is going to vote on it, as to whether you want it to move to commission or not. And then commission gets to look at it and say, do we want the manager to allocate staff at some point to take it further, right? And again, that would be obviously the solicitor, the police department, right? The traffic engineer. There's gonna be a whole bunch of people that will come in after that and say, okay, how do we actually operationalize this and understand it, make sure that it's following all the legal parameters? And then my hope would be after that, it would come back here, right, for a full kind of revetting, just to make sure that everybody's comfortable with it, with answers, right? It will take time to do all that, and then go back to commission for actual adoption, assuming that.
And we did that with the complete streets policy. It went through a very similar process. Like, we didn't have all the answers at first. We had some points of clarification, what folks were willing to think about with that plan, and it went through a couple iterations.
So I guess my short answer is don't get too hung up on detail, because there's gonna be steps that will get hung up, but if there's areas of valid question, I would just more note them down as opposed to, feel like you have to have the answer to all of it.
So I guess like one thing that I think it's more of a broad stroke, like what do we want to do is like what is to like the actual process. So it's my understanding that for like a lot of things, you would need to go through engineering. You would need to get an engineer's blessing on something. So do we want to set up the process where we are like, where everything goes to Gateway, or do we want to avoid that and try to focus on small things that don't need that, or do we want to actually have both paths parallel to each other? Like I think those are like big structural concepts the conceptual.
Yeah, no, well, and I think we will get to that kind of that key process discussion on item 8B. Because I agree, there's some questions in terms of just process. I suspect, right, the Gateway will need to be involved in some stuff. Gateway will not care on other stuff. But that's going to be, that's going to be dependent upon what is being brought forward, and how we structure the policy kind of framework that staff are going to be expected to implement, or this board is going to have to work, the framework that this board is going to have to work with. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of questions. Right, I mean, honestly, I have no idea how we contemplate painting streets and letting citizens paint streets. That's a kind of, I try to wrap my brain around that. I'm like, oh, that seems kind of, ugly and challenging to get through. But that just kind of thinking through, okay, well, we know that we need a vetting process. We know that Gateway might need to be involved. We know that the police might need to be involved, right? But let's focus on the kind of core process. Knowing that submission A might just sail through, and it's so simple that someone might want to paint a flower in the center of a street. Cool, okay.
Already some logos and centers of streets.
Paint all of the yellow, all the faded yellow curbs when people are.
Well, see, and that's where it's like, I don't know, right? But that's where we start getting into weeds and detail as opposed to,
I guess this might be on me too, but at this point, I could not yet like describe from start to finish how the process would be supposed to work. Like I would be flipping through the policy, and maybe Marty can, maybe Seth can, but I think they're the only ones that are, I don't think Justice is here. Yeah.
Well, I think honestly, from a policy perspective, well, two things, and this is kind of, I would almost bifurcate this, because I'm of two brains here. One is that don't worry about the process. It's the policy first. But second of all, having a very kind of simple, straightforward kind of process that we would anticipate going through is probably a good thing to just say, it goes to the mobility board. The mobility looks for, a certain set of attributes. And if certain things are done or not done, it goes to police and gateway, if, you know, or it doesn't, right? And then it needs to go back, and then it needs to go to the manager for final approval, with consent from the mobility board or some, again, do we know the details? No, of course not, but there's a basic outline of what the process might look like. And don't forget Public Works, they've got to be involved too. But you get my point, right? We don't need to get, you know, too far in the weeds, just create a basic kind of concept of what it will be, because there will be a lot of details that will have to get added, changed, removed, evolved. I always am a firm believer that if you write 90%, if you write the first draft, you're gonna get 90% of what you want. So write the first draft and get it out so that it's something that people are interacting with and evolving, because you set the table. So don't get too hung up on everything. Get the key concepts out there so we can move on it.
Yeah, Commissioner Flynn, I would second that, because it's, this first draft is more of a compass versus a roadmap. We're not going to figure everything out and how to get there. But if we can give some guidance at first, then it can come back through. And if we get approval, then it can come back through, and then we can fine tooth comb.
Yeah, I think that, not to cut anyone short, but I think that's a good segue into new business a little bit. And I think we'll table 8A because we don't have the street reconstruction list in everybody's hands, but DPW has put together a 5-year projection of streets they want to reconstruct. I believe the scoring right now mostly leans on the pavement condition index, and that's really was it a robot that went out? You've done some sort of analyzation of the streets, and Mr. Haberman, I don't know if you can add more context to PPI. Street Saver, that was it.
It is a software platform that uses degradation curves to basically assess, you know, kind of deterioration over time, right? Based upon a whole set of, you know, factors that it calculates, and they've calculated these algorithms over time, or these degradation curves over time. And then I think annually we check streets and eyeball them. Yeah, so then we go through and look and validate every year, say, well, you know, some areas won't deteriorate on the standard curve. So they'll go in and assess it and update the software platform, and that Street Saver platform then gives us a mechanism to understand overall health of the street surfaces, and where they might need to be, you know, repaired. Again, I worked actually at a software company that did bridge. This for bridges, same thing, right? And the problem is that a lot of agencies find that, you know, the bridge that gets repaired is the one that the head of the Department of Transportation drives over every day. Right? That's the problem. And we don't want that, right? We want to have an overall, you know, well-maintained road system, right? That is analytically understood and maintained proactively and systematically. And so Street Saver, you know, does that very effectively. It doesn't take into account all these other factors that we were talking about, but it's a good baseline, and it's very effective, you know, tool for us as a community to be, investing at the right times in our roads, so we're not deteriorating them too quickly, or overspending them.
Does that form the basis of like the capital budget as well, to kind of know when some of these streets are going to become end of life and kind of give you weight to your spending plan for those years?
Generally speaking, I mean, he probably has a better insight as to the specifics of what they're bringing to the table, but I would say generally, they know generally where we want to put the number every year. And so they're kind of taking Street Saver as your baseline, saying, okay, if we have X, right, these are the streets that we're going to prioritize. But if we have Y, we're going to add these 3 more type of thing. But then there's also, there's also a lot of other variables. Have we impacted this neighborhood, you know, heavily recently? Have we done other things that we need to be thinking about? Do we know that the water company is going to be going out the next year, right? So there's a whole lot of other variables that come into play as well.
Which kind of brings us to the second item in under new business, the street design subcommittee. This sense was taking this list, and also because we have 9 members on this board, you're really only limited to 3 to 4 in these subcommittees, and we want people to have more voice other than in this room, where this room is really more process and logistics letting the public comment, but the desire to potentially spin up a street design subcommittee and bringing that and having them, you know, capital budget is involved in the street reconstruction list, but then even design is involved as well. What should a street look like? What do we need to consider beyond? You know, right now, Street Saver looks at a cartway. It doesn't look at the sidewalk or the trees. I will highlight Edward Avenue, which has been repaved, I think, 3 times in the last 5 years, but it is also bordered by the silly sidewalks. I think we brought that up a couple months ago, and the sidewalks are out of, you know, the street trees are a mess, the sidewalks are a mess, and it hasn't looked at that street as a whole. So what does the street design subcommittee look at, looking at best case and looking at policies, but looking at best practice designs? I'd really like to have, you know, if people are really engaged in design, want to engage in design, having a subcommittee. I know folks are on the budget subcommittee, and we have just, I think, 2 of us on the policy subcommittee right now, but would like to have more folks engaged that want to engage.
If I may.
And yeah, go ahead, add some context to that.
Yeah, so honestly, guys, I'll just lay it out there. The street design subcommittee was one of the driving factors that I was thinking about when we created the mobility board. For me, this is kind of one of those questions of process of how do you allow people to engage in the dialogue earlier in the process before we're about to go tear out a street, right? I'm a firm believer that if you're talking about the 86 miles of roads that the municipality owns, the residents who live on that street should have a say on what their street is. And we hear it regularly, right? I want speed bumps, I want sidewalks, or I don't want sidewalks, right? Whatever it might be. But people have an opinion on their street, but we don't really have an effective mechanism in place that allows people to understand that, hey, in a few years, this is going to be coming. And we would like to educate you about what your street is, right? What is possible on it, and have an honest dialogue about, well, what should we be thinking about? The baseline, and again, Street Saver does a great job of saying, you've got 50 feet of asphalt, maintain 50 feet of asphalt. But we all know that there are other use cases that we might want to think about. Do we want sidewalks? Don't we want sidewalks? Do we want green stormwater infrastructure? Do we want to plant more trees, less trees? Right? Do I want a playground in the street and make it one way, right? And put bollards up? I mean, there's all kinds of things that are possible, but to have those conversations, it requires, you know, a group of people who are willing to say, in 3, 4, 5 years, this street is coming up. And we're going to Sherpa a process along that allows, you know, Gateway to be involved, you know, police involved, fire involved, public works involved, residents involved, right? And around typologies and what's possible and why, and, you know, we have emergency routes and what are the concerns that are out there? What have we heard in the past? Like, there's all these variables, but we need to get that whole dialogue farther out, because, and I've said this, I used to say it at the Environmental Sustainability Board, they'd always say, why didn't we put solar on the library? And I say, the library is already being done, it's too late. Don't fight this battle, fight the next 50. This is my effort, and my hope is that you guys will take this up, is that this is the effort to fight not just the next 50, but have a process that every street someday we'll go through this process, because we can change streets, but we need buy-in, we need, you know, broad understanding, we need to see patterns, and staff don't have capacity, right? Staff have expertise, but not capacity. So trying to create a subcommittee that Sherpas this process along, frankly, helps frame in the process, right? And then Sherpas that process along and builds a discipline in the organization long-term that will facilitate this, so that it's not just, you know, one-offs where we do Arden and it took 5 years. Right? It might be a incremental step. We say, hey, paint, right? Paint some cool stuff, put up some flex posts, put in some plastic bumpers. Does this work? No? Yes? Yes, that's great. Okay, in 5 years, we're gonna reconstruct the street. That's gonna go in hardscape. Right? That gives everybody time to understand what has happened. What is, you know, do they like it? Don't they like it? It gives everybody time to understand the capital costs, because a lot of this stuff's really expensive. We, you know, everybody in the municipality needs to understand that cost as it's coming on board. There's a lot of moving pieces around the right of way. for me, putting this in place would make a huge difference long-term, to really how we understand, and can affect change, on the right of way.
Yeah.
That's my pitch.
Could I ask Mike Haberman, Gateway probably has a lot of, process involvement in public involvement, and I'm not just talking about residents, I'm talking, stakeholders, police, fire, EMS, everybody. I know HDR has, a few of those processes. I think if we got together and, through some of that, as like a flow chart, that might be a helpful start.
I mean, you're volunteering for this potential subcommittee, Paul.
You just signed up.
I think I just did.
Selfishly, I want to hear more people's thoughts, but selfishly, I'd like to potentially tap Aaron into design subcommittee from his local experience here in Mount Lebanon, but also CMU's trying some stuff. Partnered with others, but yeah, trying some different things. If you're interested, Aaron, and I'd love to have you be part of that.
Marty from Kelso what's his involvement? The resident that's been here a few times. Was he at your meeting?
That Marty?
Oh, I didn't see him either. I didn't see him either.
Oh, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Are you willing to be on the subcommittee? or-
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, take part.
all right.
And I think, as all the subcommittees, the public can engage and, for the public that is here, how we go about advertising or letting folks know about these subcommittees, I think is critical for people to
Yeah,
engage,
that's
but
a good idea.
just reminding, I think we started a long list of potential subcommittees. And talking about liaison with other boards, I think just setting up these three of policy, budget, and design, we can let folks know these are standing committees. They can hear at these meetings and we can try to get a little more framework of when we want to meet. But I think just starting it and going from there and setting it up, we want people that are nimble and can contribute. Like, we don't want them to turn into long multiple hour efforts but we want it to be a nimble thing. There's a lot of toolkits out there from the AARP in terms of walk audits or other that sort of have a nice process for the early part, because I think that's been a question people have asked, how are we collecting pedestrian data? And I don't know, Mike, if you have any context there, but how are we collecting what's happening on a street right now, other than kind of the zoom out level. So, yeah, I mean, starting with Paul and Aaron and others, and we can maybe work offline to set up that first meeting. I'd like to look at the street reconstruction list. We have the sidewalk list we recommended to the municipality. I know there was some back and forth on Country Club, right?
There was, but we still, from the capital committee, we still submitted our recommendations and where that goes completely, whether it becomes a one-way eventually or whatever, but the committee still submitted our recommendations.
And I think that's where the design subcommittee could come in and think about what are the implications of one way? And
Sure.
is it one way, this direction, is it one way, that direction, thinking about it? I know members of the board, Beth, yourself, you went out to Country Club and looked at the context of these places and just getting more of that context to help our engineers ahead of, if we can come in with a vision for ourselves, it probably takes some things off the table or puts things on the table, which might be helpful.
I'd be
Yep.
interested in having a seat on the design.
Sounds good.
But I think the other thing to just keep in mind for this committee is, right, we get lots of requests from lots of different angles.
Yep.
Right? My street's too fast, whatever it might be, typically that's it. I want a stop sign, right? This subcommittee is going to catch a lot of things potentially, right? In terms of how do we get all what is the funnel, right? Where are things coming in? What are the decision steps that are this subcommittee will go through? Right? Because again, sometimes it's, hey, I want a speed bump, right? And I have 20 signatures. But sometimes it's, hey, we're on the street reconstruction. It's on the street reconstruction list. No one's asking any questions.
Yeah.
Right? There's lots of different angles that this subcommittee is going to catch things. So how do we understand, right, kind of this overall flow? And then what are the steps that we're going to want to conceptually go through, right? Again, I don't want to overtax Gateway. Right? I want Gateway to come in when it's time to go, okay, they've got some key concepts established, but we also need to work with Gateway to say, well, what are those key concepts that needs to be established before Gateway gets involved? So that when this subcommittee, once it's kind of up and running, got its legs underneath it, it comes to this meeting and says, here's this document, here's what, about this street, this is what's been asked for, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This mobility board can then say, yeah, we think that makes sense, and it should go to Gateway.
For example, the last round of sort of repaving projects, they were already in the hopper.
Okay.
But it's like, okay, if Cedar Boulevard is on table for, it's like, what has happened here? Where people ask for crosswalks? Are the sidewalks big enough? What do street trees look like? Are utility poles right in the middle of the street? I live on North Meadowcroft. That went through repaving because of utilities, but the flashing 15-mile-per-hour sign is directly in the middle of the sidewalk. It doesn't have any ADA access from ADA standards on either side of the street, and it's directly beside a school. It's like highlighting those things when you have a one-way street that's 27 feet wide, which has about 10 feet to play with. What can we do, and what is the desire from that neighborhood? Hey, neighborhood, this could be a contraflow bike lane or a climbing lane in the other direction. This could be this could be that. I think the active transportation plan will be a guiding document. I would love for this subcommittee to have the opportunity to engage with, if the scope allows, to engage with Tool, which, I don't know, can we say Tool is the prohibitive favorite to go forward? I mean, I think Dormont is voting, but Tool has a lot of recommendations in this space, and engage with that group and find out some process ideas from them as well. So, would anyone like any more discussion, or I guess make a motion to stand up this subcommittee?
I'll make a motion to add the street design subcommittee.
Second.
I guess I do have a
We
discussion.
can discuss.
Yep.
Just more for clarity, so the scope of this subcommittee is to look at the street reconstruction list and make sure that active transportation principles and all the fun stuff in the comprehensive plan are actually being considered and proposing ideas, so that eventually those make their way to Gateway and get put into actual, would that be a summary of what we're actually voting on?
Yeah, I think, and to also handle reactive requests from the community. So we have our proactive and our reactive.
Yeah, I think traffic calming policy is something policy should take up and think of how traffic calming occurs, because it's kind of separate from street reconstruction. I don't think scrubgrass was on the street reconstruction list. It's actually, and from anecdotal evidence, in pretty good shape. But Dell Avenue has come up in 2 subsequent meetings. Do we need to go look at Dell? Do we need to inform Dell? Will the active transportation be able to inform it on its own? But looking at those things that come up, because we're hearing, Washington Road is a little bit different because there's an active PennDOT project associated with that, and we believe a study associated with that. But these other streets that keep coming up, I think, it's Cedar, you can look at Cedar in certain iterations. That's why Cedar and Hollycrest came through. And I think that's a great intersection reconstruction design, but then I've also seen some bikes trying to navigate that and navigating what's now become a chute. Be like, if we could have zoomed out a little bit more and thought about some of those things, and just give the whole look. But I think you're right, getting that into Gateway and getting it into an RFP and acknowledging the policies that exist as well.
I'm mainly just asking so that we're saying it out loud, because I feel like sometimes we can just get into the habit of voting on bullet points, and everyone might have their own idea in their head of what those words mean.
Yep.
And I think that's a good idea, probably too. We should define, just in a couple sentences or, a paragraph form, what exactly these subcommittees do and what their purpose is.
I like that.
Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, I will give the floor to Mr. Haberman for Scrubgrass.
All right, I'm gonna share my screen. We talked a little bit about this last month, but I'm gonna dive into a little bit more detail. And I think, at least procedurally from this board's standpoint, if through our discussions this evening, this board feels comfortable moving forward with a recommendation that wouldn't be a bad idea because we've already kind of been working with Rudy and with budget season starting. We've got a line item that's gonna be part of those discussions coming ahead for the Scrubgrass neighborhood, so if this board can get to a consensus on what I present here tonight and get through with the recommendations, and that'll help that budgeting process for this, call it short term or lower cost or initial phase of traffic calming for Scrubgrass to move forward in the first part of next year. So you're all familiar, I think, with Scrubgrass. So we're talking about the section from Cochrane Road all the way down to Swallow Hill. What I'll present here tonight is basically some exhibits that.
We're still looking at the.
See, Teams would have put that on there.
You gotta share your screen instead of your window.
Right. There. Try that one. Oh, I see screen.
There you go.
Okay, so this is, I condensed essentially all of the options, and we had a series of probably 20 to 25 exhibits that they kind of built on each other and had short-term, long-term, hardscape, had all kinds of stuff on there. And ultimately where the neighborhood settled was this short-term kind of phase one traffic calming measures for the street between Swallow Hill and Cochrane. I got a brief summary here that I just added to this overview sheet, and then I'll go through just a couple of little sections, like a typical section, so you see what that would look like. The intersection of Elm Springs, so you can see what the options are there. And then at the bottom of the stairs from Old Hickory, what we would be looking at there. So essentially what the neighborhood had a consensus on was changing the entire footprint from curb to curb with pavement markings, where we would eradicate all the existing pavement markings, which is basically a double yellow line. That creates right now it creates a 13-foot lane if you're coming from Swallow Hill up to Cochrane. And coming in the other direction, it's for lack of a better term, a 17-foot lane. The curb side on the westbound approach is really for parking, but it's not delineated, and all of the homes that are over there have their own driveways. So if there are cars parked there, it might be one, or it might be a contractor during the day. It's not heavily parked. So essentially you have a 17-foot travel lane with no horizontal deflection or impediments to slow you down visually. So the first thing would be to eradicate that double yellow line, put a new double yellow line that would create two 11-foot lanes, which are effective 10.5-foot lanes because the double yellow line itself is a foot from side to side. And then delineating the parking lane on the north side of the road, which is where all the residences are. Also with a pavement marking, just to define those parking spaces and create an area that doesn't appear to be just 17-foot wide of asphalt, that you can use it however you feel, for speed and whatever else. And then upgrading the pavement markings at the intersection with piano key markings, and then delineating the crosswalk with piano keys and yield lines and signage at the bottom of the stairs from Old Hickory. Then also at that location, installing a bump out. It could be hardscape, it could be temporary measures like we talked about, flexible delineators and pavement markings, things like that. But you'll see on the exhibit when I show you that one, that what that ultimately could look like. And then one thing that I added, based on some discussion from the neighborhood meeting and then some feedback from this board last month, is there's a section. Let's go back to here. Is this going to pop up? It does. There is a section that's to the west of the staircase that there is no sidewalk due to I think there's a wall and maybe a stream over there. So here's the staircase that comes down. It's not marked, but there is a receiving ramp on the other side, and then the sidewalk itself runs up towards Cochrane. So from this point until down here past this guide rail, there is no sidewalk on either side. So if anybody does come down those steps and is going in that direction, they're either walking in this yard over here, or they're walking in the parking lane that's not delineated on that side. So that's the only section of Scrubgrass that doesn't have a formal sidewalk or refuge or area for pedestrians to use. So what I added to the plan was it's this section that would look like the rest of it where we delineate the parking, but we would add some features to this to create a 5 foot wide, call it, I don't wanna call it a sidewalk, but pedestrian path to get you from steps to be able to cross over and then walk down along this.
Sidewalk picks back up further down, doesn't it?
Yeah, as soon as you get to, this
Right,
driveway to
guardrail.
this house here.
Yeah.
And I'm going backwards. So the sidewalk picks up right there at that. So that's the only section that's missing because of the walls and the stream that was through here and the guide rail, there's just no sidewalk there, so just wanted to kind of point that out. And then the last thing was, adding a few of those electronic speed notification devices, like just the smaller, they're just boxes that'll flash your speed for every vehicle that goes by. They can be on speed limit signs, they're battery powered or solar powered, they don't require big, heavy duty infrastructure or electrical, hardwiring or anything like that, so they're popping up in a lot of other places. And then we did take a look at, because there were some comments about checking how many posted speed limit signs there are. You'll see on the one exhibit, it's way over posted. So there's not an issue with the number of speed limit signs that are out there now or where they are. So that's kind of the overview. The first exhibit here is the one down at this crossing on the stairs. So a couple of different options here. Piano key pavement markings. This is also showing the 11-foot lanes, the 10.5-foot effective that we talked about. The parking lane on the northern side. And then essentially what we would do over here would be pavement markings and flexible delineators this would be a 3-foot buffer, which is kind of what you're seeing when they're putting bike lanes and things in downtown. It's a thicker white line with a flexible delineator and then another thick white line. It creates that, well, it's not a barrier, it's something physical between the 5 foot that we would leave between this line and the curb.
Could we put,
Go ahead.
we put the rubber bumpers in there?
I've seen them, there's a couple places, I think in the city, they've done sort of the rubber curb stops
Yeah.
in there, but even those delineators we showed before, the zebra thing, or was it the zebra, whatever that Z-Club.
I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean, it really can be any of those treatments.
Sure.
Because it wouldn't be hardscape, so it would be whatever would be preferable and visible and for not just for the motorists, but then also, considering public works and what they're gonna be
Yeah.
dealing with.
That's what I was gonna ask you as far as snow removal, like
Yeah.
how that impedes.
So I think if you have the smaller, 4-inch plastic or temporary curbs that are in there that you put in, almost like if you end up having a 5 or 6-inch snow, maybe you don't see them and the next thing you know.
That's
Yeah.
all I don't
You know,
want.
we're ripping
They're ripped off.
Yeah, there's-
We have a supply of 10,000 of them sitting
Yeah.
somewhere.
Yeah, I'd like to just test them out. What's interesting, I think, in that segment that's missing is you're not gonna have, there shouldn't be any desire for people to pull into that walking path because there's,
Right.
you're up against the guardrails, not,
Right.
but I would just like to see how it holds up to plow season, how, like, just as an iterative step.
And some of the feedback from some of those residents, and especially, including the resident who lives in this house, I believe he was at the meeting.
Mhm.
He was one of the ones who brought it up that he said, nobody ever parks there because even if there's no house there, it's his house and he's got parking available for his visitors, so.
It closes the gap in the
Yeah,
network.
and there's certainly not a lack of parking availability out there now,
No,
Right.
so,
He did say he doesn't like the guardrail.
Yeah,
I
I
think-
did say that.
right, he did. But
It's another problem.
phase one is probably.
Yeah.
And then ultimately, one thing that maybe has to come out of this is, I kind of modified this in Bluebeam, it doesn't look the greatest, but does the bump out also want to be something that's temporary and done with markings as opposed to a hardscape or a curb where you just have this one little hardscape curb that comes out that's not consistent with the rest of the corridor? So could something in there be done to still accomplish reducing the crossing length, creating the pedestrian pass going to the west, and then still get everything kind of to tie together. This is only shown as a dash because there's really no parking because there's 2 driveways there. I think you might have been able to get 1 space in there. So this is more the visual for the motorists to keep them in the lane that we're defining for them. That's why it's dashed. So there's some different things that could be done here. It doesn't have to be hardscape that would still accomplish the same thing. Whether it's, carrying the
we put some-
3-foot buffer pavement marking through there, but not the delineators, things
Can
like
we
that.
put some goring and Gordon.
Yeah, a couple of.
Outside of the driveway
couple
areas.
of angled
Yeah.
hatches, yeah, exactly.
This is something I've seen in the Cedar and Hollycrest one, but the shark, I feel like the shark teeth, and maybe this is just a condition, could we get an offset from the crosswalk so that those shark teeth come, so people aren't,
Yeah.
stopping right at the crosswalk? I think the one that was put in on Mount Lebanon Boulevard in Castle Shannon has a little more of an offset on the shark teeth.
As far as their, they might be offset by
Yeah. Like
5 or
8
10 feet or
yeah,
something like
8
that.
feet
Yeah,
or
yeah,
so.
yeah. Yep.
And so I mean, I have a markup, but we can keep moving through and I can
Yeah,
send that
I
markup.
mean, for argument's sake, this is
Yeah.
all like conceptual,
Yeah.
going on LiDAR. So if we can if this board can land on components A through F as a recommendation, the hard engineering of it and putting the fine details together would come as the next step. So I would say one is, one would be how we treat this area. I don't think this board necessarily has to define, do you put flexible delineators or temporary curbs in the buffer? It's just that conceptually,
We're gonna,
creating that walking path and creating that buffer with temporary measures and paint and signage and marking this crossing. I think that is the recommendation that would come out of here, not necessarily the fine details of all of those things. Because it will ultimately come back. It's gonna come to the commission and they'll kind of vet some of that stuff. The next exhibit is just really just showing the general area that you would see along the way there where you have all the driveways on the north side. We would be marking the parking lane. We wouldn't mark where the driveways are because they're all just basically openings. We do want to leave define those at the 5-foot offset, which is what the ordinance requires anyways for parking up against the driveway. And it just visually creates the travel lanes for traffic going eastbound and westbound and pushes them away from the curb and delineates that parking lane, which is rarely utilized. Or if it is utilized, it's, sporadic, which sometimes can cause issues because folks aren't necessarily expecting a car to be parked there.
I know this is only an interim step. I think I've only seen one catch basin on scrub grass, but in this condition, since there isn't the parking demand in the future, it'd be interesting to know what the stormwater and potentially using those parking lanes to get some curb bump outs and maybe some away from the curb trees. Nature's bollards in there, I think that could come as we see how this goes and be like, okay,
Yep.
parking demand's still low, we could get some other iterative steps in there.
Yeah, I think where we landed on that was that there were, further on in my presentation, there was that kind of stuff with more hardscape and taking away some of those parking areas for streetscape type things.
Yeah.
But I think where we landed was, there may be other things that come out of the active
Yeah,
transportation.
I think that's
plan.
exactly right. Yep.
And the street design policy that's gonna come out of this mobility board, so.
Yep.
That's kind of where we landed on this phase one, just to eliminate some of the issues that you're seeing out there.
Let's a save cost for later.
Yeah, how it is today. This next one is just the Elm Spring intersection with scrub grass, so just showing again how the parking lanes will be delineated, how the travel lanes will be delineated. The gray lines that you're seeing behind there are where they are now, the double yellow and the stop bar goes all the way over. Cars aren't ever really parked in here, so you really have this 17-foot wide area that in this direction and 13-foot in this direction. You have two crosswalks that are marked just with the parallel lines just across scrub grass, but there's no markings on Elm Spring or Old Hickory. So it'd just be to kind of get that up to the standard that we're using elsewhere in the municipality. Given some tracers to keep the lanes where they want to be. Yield lines, again, those can be offset a little bit further. Just all visual things. They're markings on the ground for a motorist and to clarify things for pedestrians and bicyclists and things going through there. As an alternative, I did add in this exhibit that kind of shows that same thing, but with the bulb outs on the north side of the road, because again, no one's really parking up here. Now, whether that is something that this board wants to include as a like temporary bulb outs, whether we do that with markings and delineators or things like that, it becomes a little bit trickier if you're not doing the hardscape, because then you can really define and put ADA ramps and all that stuff in. So creating this bulb out with delineators makes it a little bit more difficult where the crossing ultimately gets painted and where it leads you to, because there's not a ramp over here and there's the ramps over here. So it could be a little bit trickier, but if there's an interest in I would say, creating bulb outs with temporary features that if that's where this board feels that we should be looking, if this goes forward, do you know, include that in your recommendation, or don't, or this,
Before I
or just
saw.
go back to the original, which is just the pavement markings and cleaning all that up there.
You stay on this one, Mike?
This one,
Yeah, before I saw you had a second page, I started marking this up because these areas had me concerned that people are gonna be making movement, even though the parking lane technically, we're gonna make movements through there.
Yep.
So I personally like the bulb out iteration and, I don't anticipate other things coming unless there would be, I guess the temporary desire would be if the ATP says this should have a separated bike lane, you know, something of that sort.
right,
And so that, you know, if we put in concrete, then it kind of precludes a change. But I like tightening that intersection up and giving a little more straightforward. I know it's complicated and temporary, a little more complicated and temporary,
yeah,
but allows us flexibility
yes.
and improves on my concerns of this one. But
And there are some examples over the past 5 or 6 years that the city has done down in the Oakland area where they've kind of created bulb outs
I
with.
think over by Shenley, they had a couple
Yeah.
of those.
Actually, if you go on South Braddock right now, they just put in a bunch of new stuff.
Yeah.
Literally.
Go ahead, Jim.
Well, I was gonna ask for temporary bulb outs too, even if nothing
Mhm.
was put in concrete. And not just for narrowing that very wide intersection, shortening the crosswalks. But also because I was thinking in terms of large vehicles like our fire, I think it would just be fire trucks in this area. I don't, pretty sure there are no buses or anything.
Right.
Probably not too much truck traffic. either.
Utility.
But
Garbage
but
trucks.
yeah, garbage. So, yeah, so theoretically, if we wanted to go with permanent bulb outs anyway, I view that a temporary bulb out is something where vehicles like that would have a chance to practice and maybe complain if they and say, well, if that's gonna be concrete, it's gonna need to have a mountable apron or something, so. Yeah, I
It does
like-
give us an opportunity to see how they do and get some
Yeah.
feedback and judged by the condition of them in a year.
Yeah.
See how many flex buses are left.
Right.
Yeah, no, I honestly, I agree. I think, yeah. Well, and the other thing I was thinking about was the bump out, the temporary bump outs would actually be a place for tactical urbanism, to run amok and paint whatever you want to paint. Conceptually, right? I mean, obviously you could start with like the standard green or whatever it might be, but you could do those types of spaces are places where we could proactively say, if residents are interested in painting and coming up with a design, you could do these things. Right? There are certain things we would have to require, but we are setting we're creating the canvas. That's the word. Thank you. For you. So there's interesting, right, different ways to think about doing that, and allowing some flexibility and exploring what a future hardscape might look like. So
And I think there's enough options out there that we can
Mhm.
come up with something that will still work and make sense to motorists and pedestrians crossing there.
I'm sorry, could you go back to the bulb out one? Okay, this is nothing to do with the traffic calming, I'm talking about pedestrian stuff again. So the ADA ramps in the upper right quadrant, is that just displaying slope? Or is that concrete? Would you anticipate the bulb out being grass, kind of like it is? in
Well,
Cedar Salem?
if these were hardscape, it would be like similar to what was done at Holly Crest.
Okay, so grass in between there.
Correct.
I'm gonna say as a structural engineer, I like that because it avoids your sharp corners in like weird triangular concrete placements. As a pedestrian, I do not like that because it makes me zigzag into the crosswalk. And especially not as a pedestrian, not as a pedestrian with a stroller, and also not as a hypothetical child on a bike who doesn't feel comfortable riding on the road. That's a sharp little, maybe not too bad on this one.
So there really wouldn't be anything hardscape in here. This would be.
No, we are going off
For
the
now would
pavement.
be, the markings would actually go into bulb out that we would be creating with delineators or whatever we're creating them with. So if it were to go hardscape or something else out of the active transportation plan or whatever it wants to look like, that would be its own. Like, none of this was a scenario if it were hardscape that I presented.
Yes, well, I guess I'm making like a general comment on that design. That I don't like that very narrow 45-degree. I know everyone likes the new intersection on Cedar, but that's my one gripe about it.
Noted.
I agree. I'd like to feel a little more in concrete and just have a full blended, detectable warning service. And it costs a little more, but I think it just cleans it up. It cleans up the movements, cause I could see kids or anyone walking, being like, I'm not waiting for that curb ramp, I'm just gonna cut across, for example. I'm walking here, am I gonna walk up to this curb ramp and cross it? No, I'm gonna walk right through here
Yeah.
and just start, so then you've got your go path, that's just gonna happen.
I wasn't even getting to that. I'm just saying I'm walking straight across and now I need to like. It's maybe not so bad on this one.
No, it's not as,
If you,
yeah.
depending on the exact intersection, I have to like jog up Elm Spring,
There's
then
a
jog back.
one in Cochrane and Morrison that's kind of that, which I appreciate that they put curb ramps in, that was PennDOT, but I'm just gonna walk straight. I'm not gonna go
Mhm.
6 feet that way and cross here and then 6 feet that.
And if the
Well,
weather is
that's
great
like
and you're
a
an
path, but people
able-bodied,
do it anyway.
Yep.
if the weather's great and you're an able-bodied person, that's fine.
Yep.
But if it's muddy or snowy or you're in a wheelchair, it's like, oh no, you gotta follow that path.
Mhm.
But you can,
Noted.
you can, play with this to come up with a recommendation for the temporary.
Yep. I think out of this, if coming out of here is that include bulb outs with
Mhm.
temporary
Yeah.
features and pavement markings, that I don't think the fine details of it need to happen right now.
Yeah, no, that's
Yep.
a very general comment about
The
stuff.
last exhibit was just kind of how things would transition coming off of Cochrane and approaching Cochrane. Right now, you already can't park, there's already no parking signs on this first stretch here.
Is there any boring there, Mike? I don't, like, just the dash,
This is just this little bulb.
I didn't know if we could put some in that no parking area, but it's not, there's
Oh,
not.
in
that
here?
much.
Yeah. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just to visually like get people moving into the.
Yeah, and it kind of needs to be this wide up here just
Yeah.
because of the angle of the turn and everything, and then this would just get us transition out to that 11-foot section with the 8-foot parking.
I think PennDOT put a new curb ramp on this side of,
Up here.
yeah, they did something new there that I think.
And then just one more, and then I think that the details of exactly where the speed minder signs go. This one coming westbound is kind of right at the top, top of the hill before you start going down the steep part towards the staircase. Coming up the hill, maybe it wants to be before the crosswalk at the bottom of the stairs. But essentially, we're just saying whether out of this board, it's one in each direction somewhere, or 2 in each direction, final location to be determined, I think is where we'll come out here. And then I did go on here and label all of this existing speed limit signs. So the MUTCD says that there needs to be one when you turn onto a road, which would be this one. And that would be this one. And then if you're coming out of Elm Spring, it would be this one. And if you turn this way, it's this one. Other than that, you just need to have them spaced every half a mile. So there's there's plenty of them.
We've addressed this
It's-
many times, obviously.
But they're like white noise, nobody says.
Yeah.
Well,
Like.
Yeah, so if anybody says, there just aren't enough posted speed limit signs out there and people don't realize what the speed limit is on Scrubgrass, they're definitely not
I
looking.
think they just don't care.
Like the speed minder, the digital signage, do those also collect data? Like, will we get? any
Those are
from
more-
those? Are they just?
Those are more expensive ones. The ones that are just gonna flash your speed, you can either have them flash it or turn it off. Those are the more
Yeah,
low cost.
would it make sense to add one to this? To get the data? To see if we get better speed minding or better adherence once we do all this?
I think that's up to this board if you want to recommend that.
What's the pre and post data collection process right now? Do they?
So right now, we have all of the baseline data that we collected, all the turning room accounts, ATR data, and 2 location speeds, so we have that kind of baseline.
Mhm.
The policy essentially says we collect that so that after a plan is implemented, if questions arise, or if somebody says, hey, it's not working, or can you check and see if it's working, then we can collect data, but there's no requirement to collect post-implementation data.
I think that's what I'd like I mean, it would be great for the policy subcommittee to look at that, because I think just for the example, the city of Pittsburgh's done a great job of that, putting the traffic calming in and being like, we reduced speeding by 30%, and sometimes they have even better, like we've reduced, I think it's a good thing to have. I don't, especially when they don't collect data, I don't really believe in these.
Well,
I don't.
and that's what, like, honestly, like, for me, if we're gonna spend the money and do this, I wanna know, was this effective? Like, you know,
Yeah.
and I think that should, for me, that should be a prerequisite.
Yeah, it's pretty simple because we have all the exact locations where we collected the data
Right.
already. So it wouldn't be difficult to collect that exact same data after the fact.
I
Now,
bet-
with this,
Yeah.
some of the data with this phase one or the short-term stuff we're talking about here might not show a significant, but likely won't show a significant reduction in the speeds at those locations, but at the locations where, you know, at the crosswalk, at the intersection, you know, it's gonna have, pushing the cars and squeezing their lane down and pushing them away from the curb, it's gonna have the effect that we want it to have, but doesn't necessarily mean that if the speeds at which they were 30, one of them 39 miles per hour was the 85th percentile speed. It might go to 37, but it's still, I think, gonna have a pretty big benefit, more so than just that 2 mile per hour.
Yeah, I'd kind of rather know the breakout cost and say, let's just put that into the, you know, whatever the traffic unit is doing right now from a data collection perspective, and because I really would like to, I know it's not a requirement, but I'd really like to have that post data information to, yeah, find out, even if it's interim, and it's like, actually, this worked really well.
Well, I think it's easy enough too, because the police have the ones that they can mount now to like utility poles, and they can make, and you won't even know that they're there. That's what they use to collect data now.
Yeah. I like people not knowing.
So that's different than, yeah, that's different than these signs.
Do we have any of the permanent ones that are capable of their,
Well. I don't know. Do we have any permanent speed minder signs that constantly collect data? I think we just have the one that they.
They're all the.
No, I
They
mean,
move
as
around.
far as I know, the police department don't, we have a couple that we hang on poles, and then I believe our, big mobile signboards will collect it too, but
Yeah, those are.
we don't have any that, they just keep them up all the time.
How would these be mounted?
A lot of them, they just mount them right to existing square channel posts with speed limit signs on, that the speed lit signs are on now.
Would that be the probable solution in this instance? That. Or just
The real purpose of these is just to inform motorists.
Well, I guess what I'm asking, for, like, in
Not
terms,
really
I'm
to
asking,
collect the data.
I'm asking in terms of like permanence and like how, like, are we building like a giant galvanized steel arm over this?
No.
road? Okay,
No,
that's
no,
not-
no.
No, I'm
Okay.
trying to think of where I can.
Those things can go on regular.
Yeah,
Signs on a
that's what they're
sign.
doing now. They're just literally, if there's an existing speed limit sign, they're just mounting it right
Yeah,
to
they're
that.
not big.
And they're just battery. Yeah, they're
So you
tiny.
see the speed limit sign and you see how
Correct.
it's going.
But your car also, so many people's cars that drive is also telling you, and people are still ignoring that.
But they may be ignoring it, but it's also, there are, you know,
Yeah.
very, quite a few posted speed limit signs on this road.
Yeah.
That if nobody's looking at them, if there's something flashing at them, then they do look at it and they see the 25 above it and it's flashing 37 or 38. The way the road is now, the typology of the road, you probably don't even realize you're going 37 miles per hour. It's just
Yeah.
so wide open and easy to do that at least that's gonna tell you, you know, hey, it's 25 and you're going 37 or 38 miles per hour. At least get you thinking about what you're doing.
So a couple things, I'm just thinking about, right, and some of these kind of just think of it as you will. Installing these devices, right, the incremental cost is negligible, generally speaking. From a policy perspective, we could say, look, when we know that the street is going to be redesigned, we want these added into the cost of construction and added permanently, well, not permanently, yeah, relatively speaking, because we want an extended period of time for analysis for the temporary impact, temporary tests, incremental changes that we're gonna make. And we wanna collect data over time. I'm not saying that's not a policy that exists now, but that is a policy that could conceptually be added, right? Because this is an interesting example of, it would be kind of cool to stick something up there over time and say, well, our assumption is it's not gonna change much. Did it? No? Okay, well, what else? What are we gonna do next? I don't know. Let's try the next thing.
Yeah.
Because this is an interesting street for us,
Mhm.
right? That we know is an ongoing challenge. And yeah, it wouldn't hurt to have ongoing data collection there, simply for the purpose of,
Trying things out.
yeah, trying things out.
Even to the extent that every time the police department has collected screening data with their device that flashes the speed, inevitably the neighborhood comes to the meeting and says, the data's not accurate because when people see the speed flash, they slow down.
Mhm.
So anecdotally, if that's really happening, if we had these signs here all the time, great, people will slow down when they see how fast they're going.
Right.
But it would be good to have that data over a long period of time.
Yeah.
To really tell us that, or do they eventually like get
Go numb
used
to
to
it,
it and get numb to that as well? So that's why I'd like to see it over a long period of time, even if it doesn't have to go for them maybe, but it would be nice to consider that.
I know we had citizens comments. Can we take looks like somebody in the forum wants
Yeah,
to weigh in.
I'm through my,
Yeah.
I came late, I had to work.
Can you go to them?
Yeah,
And give your name and address, please?
Yeah, sorry, everyone.
No, you're okay.
I had to work till 6, but anyway, hello, my name is
Go to the podium,
Victoria.
please.
Oh.
So our vast audience can hear you.
We have one other too, if that's okay.
Yeah, and I mean, if people come, I want them to be able to talk, so yeah.
Thank you. I do live on Scrubgrass. My name is Victoria. Hello. And I'm just really here because I know you guys are working on this and I thank you so much because this is such a stressful thing as a resident of Scrubgrass. And I just want to share what recently happened. On Friday, my parents were over helping babysit and they parked on the street in front of my house as they always do. And somebody literally totaled their car, totaled it. They hit it. They were speeding. You know how wide that road is also. It's almost unfathomable that you would even sideswipe a car, let alone total it. And that's just one of a couple incidents. I have another video from my doorbell cam from last Christmas where a car was coming from the Swallow Hill side. I live on the other side, and they went up over onto my yard. They crossed the center lane. And I am just here as a witness, a testimony, whatever it is. I just have to tell you, I have video to show you. God forbid a child or, sometimes they walk my baby in the stroller. I mean, those cars could have come over and hit them.
What's your house number, just so we,
Mhm.
for the record?
736. In fact, we called the police because we had to file it as a police report. I've talked to police before and I've mentioned, hey, it would be nice if maybe you guys would kind of have a presence on the street every once in a while, just, people see an officer and they slow down. But I'm just here as an actual person that lives on Scrubgrass to tell you how horrible it is. And I just appreciate everything you're doing. And I just thought those two examples, at least that I was a part of, are worth mentioning.
So from what you saw, it's that.
Admittedly, I am not an engineer.
Most of us aren't.
Anything is better than what, I think the parking lanes are great because again, it takes away the perception that the road is so big. Oh, I can kind of do whatever I want. I think the speed flash, I can't remember the exact term you used, the signs that flash the speed.
Speed winders.
Yes, that would be great. I know myself when I'm on a road, if I'm not paying attention and I see that slows me down. People use it as a racetrack, cut through. They don't think about the fact that people are walking, kids are walking to school. And like I said, I mean, I can show you the video. It's astounding. They hit the car so hard, it moved like a whole spot up.
If they ended up in your yard, that means they went over the sidewalk, right?
That was the Christmas one, yeah. They were coming the opposite direction and they crossed the center, and I don't know if they were drunk, I don't know what
Yeah.
the situation was, but you know, it shakes me because I have a child and I'm sure a lot of you do, and it's just not, it's not good.
It looks like your area has probably been on, I'll say the police's radar before, because it looks like there's VASCAR markings in front. I don't know if they've ever done VASCAR.
They did mention that, but
Collection there, because it has the markings for it, but they would, looks like they'd have to sit in someone's driveway to yours or your neighbors to the other side to do it. Yeah, I also see a catch basin nearby, which are getting back to the tree point. That could have been a nice place to have another permanent bump out, so. But yeah, I appreciate your commentary.
yes, I did not mean to interrupt.
No.
Oh, that's okay.
No, I think it's great.
Good timing.
Yeah,
I just appreciate you, thank you.
Well,
Yes.
while you're here, this doesn't really have much to do with the traffic coming, but what do you think about the end of the road at, is it Swallow Hill, the western end? That, with the double stop, because when I visited the street, a couple of months ago, and I went all the way to the end, and I reached the two lanes that share a stop sign in that really wide bend. What do you think about leaving your neighborhood that way?
On Swallow Hill, you mean, coming,
Yeah, is that the name of the road that
Yeah,
swoops
it's
down?
a weird,
Sager?
it is weird, yes, and then it goes to Seeger, I think.
Yeah.
And you asked, what do I think about?
Yeah, what do
the
you think
double
about that?
stop? I'm not sure,
And the swoop.
okay, well, I don't love any of it, because
Yeah.
obviously, but are you saying they would implement a stop sign coming down, I'm sorry, I'm not understanding.
That is currently outside the scope of what we're
Oh,
talking
okay.
about. I'm wondering if I should, if I should.
You might
add
have to
that.
show, because I'm not understanding. the
Oh,
double
no, I'm just
stop.
saying about, do you drive through there sometimes or
Yes.
walk through? What do you,
I do drive.
is it easy? Do you think it's okay?
Sometimes cars fly down the hill,
Okay.
but I don't find that to be too terrible of a problem. I sit at the stop sign and wait my turn. You know, the people that are coming down the hill don't stop until after that point, as you know, like right at the four-way stop where you go to Seeger up to St. Clair Hospital and all that.
Yeah.
But
Sorry, yeah.
yes, no, I just think that people speed down that hill, but that's, they have the right of way, right? If I'm explaining that correctly, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Again, just a resident.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
If that place had the right landscape, that would be perfect for a roundabout, because
Oh,
there's
yeah.
so many different.
There's a lot of weird movements
Yeah,
happening there, and the
it is.
hospital being close by. Yeah, I think the active transportation plan needs to look at some of those typical. Got another public are you a Scrubgrass resident?
Yeah.
Yeah, come on, let's, I want to keep us on time, but let's,
I'll make it
I know people have come. Oh, and yeah,
Blaine Lucas, 744 Scrubgrass.
Oh, yeah, I know.
2 doors down from Victoria. We've lived there a long time. I can't remember with your board or maybe the traffic board when we first raised this. We found out a couple of years after we moved into our house that a car had actually veered off and crashed into our house. Okay, it's one of the reasons now.
your SIP's pretty far back from the.
Right, yeah, I mean, we're not close to the road.
Yeah.
In answer to your question about that intersection, I don't know what you can do about that. It's kind of, had to go up to St. Clair this morning and you just kind of wait and you amble out. It would be nice if it was kind of a little bit smoother flow, but to be honest with you, I don't know what you can do there to fix that issue.
We can do stuff.
The right amount of money.
Yeah.
But, well, actually, in terms of money, I mean, Victoria's situation, that's the third major accident of vehicles crashing into parked cars on our road in the last 16 months. The first one was the Antonelli's down further near, not quite to where the crosswalk hopefully will be soon, where a vehicle coming down hit their car so hard, shoved it about 200 feet down the street and up to the curb, off the curb on the upside part. Then about the time Gateway was doing the speed monitoring at about a couple doors up from Victoria's house, a car plowed into our neighbor's parked pickup truck. And I think that individual may have even had to go to the hospital, I'm not sure. Again, getting to the point, the speed issue, but there's also a safety issue, as Victoria's talking about. The more you can hopefully visually slow people down, but keep the vehicles away from the sidewalk and the houses, I think would be helpful. And talking to Mike after the last meeting, when you get to the point when you're talking about striping the parking lane, I understand one option is more expensive, is to basically have that stripe have a surface that like a rumble almost. And I think the couple accidents we've seen here recently drives home why that might be helpful, because it would alert drivers that if they're not even paying attention to the visual cue, that they feel that on their rumble strip. Sorry.
Rumble stick. Those are the transverse pavement
Yeah.
markings.
And Blaine's house, just as a Google measurement, sits 60 feet off of the curb.
Well,
But it's also low, so it had gravity.
So you get a little more,
Yeah.
you can really speed up going down into the house, but
Thank you, Blaine.
thank you very much.
And that, just to, in the transparency element, I know somebody else came in a little bit. Do you have some public comment? I know this is a little out of turn, but yeah, you've brought your son here, like, feel free to come up and talk, and we're about to wrap this up, so or should we, is it specific to Scrubgrass?
No.
Okay,
I think we should let her, she said she lives on Kelso.
Yeah. Yeah, come on up.
I don't want to change the topic of Scrubgrass, but,
Yeah.
so Marty Kowalczyk, 562 Oxford Boulevard. I'm just coming. I missed last meeting. In August, we submitted a petition just for that crossing on Kelso from, oh gosh, it's just alluded, so when you cross over Kelso, over.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. So just kind of checking up on what the next steps are. School started, so traffic is increasing. I don't know if because there was some construction on Cedar, if that's pushed some traffic over onto Kelso. It seems to have subsided, but it was pretty busy there for a while, whenever school started. So just trying to get an update. I know we offered some options, but it sounds like there's probably a plethora of things that we don't know that are available to us, that just to provide some more visibility. I don't know if the crossing strips were repainted this season yet or not, but
Rudy said that. did.
Yeah, he said they did.
We
were
gave
they?
an update last,
Yeah.
Yeah.
last session.
Okay.
And there were, I think with the piano strips, I believe, at the new crossing, across Pembroke.
I think he said
Yeah.
it was in June.
And did they also put a flashlight?
Pedestrian,
No.
like a pedestrian sign, I think he said.
There's just static signs, just.
Pedestrian crossing.
Those
Yeah,
not-
yes, that.
Nothing's changed for
We have
signage.
Kelso on our side.
So Kelso was our first recommendation for the sidewalk plan.
Oh,
So,
okay.
so that was also given last month, or last meeting by the Capital Committee, which reviewed a lot of the sidewalk, recommended sidewalks, and it was first on our list.
Oh, wonderful.
And you asked about sort of the menu of options. It is a state road, and so, there's things that I think are gonna be able to happen after the active transportation plan or forward. But we felt sidewalks is something we can recommend right now. We don't control the purse strings, so, but that was our top recommendation for sidewalks, since it's something that could be within municipal control right now.
I know it's expensive, right? So I know that the
I-
budget.
Kids getting
Yeah.
hit by drivers is not, there's no cost. I'm not, I'll pay more taxes, so that
I
doesn't
agree. I
happen.
agree. I know Mike had mentioned in I think the August meeting that we were here when we did submit the petition, that signage is something that does not have to be approved by PennDOT, or maybe it does, but it's not as restrictive as some of the other things that we need to do. And I think signage would be very important there. It's just, you just don't realize it. You drive through and kind of, I think you had mentioned it's white noise, you just drive it every day, you don't realize. So I think something just to indicate anything kind of back to her, so anything would be better than nothing. So I don't know how long that takes for the approval for the sidewalks, but just trying to keep in front of you guys, just so we're still here and still, active. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. I
Yep.
appreciate the update.
I'd like to know.
Anybody online?
Here's yes.
Well, I figured that I wanted to.
Open board.
Yeah.
We'll call.
This person.
Yep.
That way I can get to you guys.
Yeah. Go ahead, Lindy. If you can state your name and address.
Sure, thank you. Thank you for having me. My name's Lindy Drulia. I live at 300 Gilkinson Road, where the Timber Creek condominiums are located. I'd like to raise a safety concern with the township, building the new stairs from the property of 300 Gilkinson that connect to Inglewood Drive. Being the pedestrian stairs have been closed for the better part of a decade, and they're currently in the process of being rebuilt. Reopening that stairway has been said by the township to provide better access for Gilkinson Road to Markham Elementary School and the surrounding neighborhood. We don't disagree there, but I would like to point out that Gilkinson Road has a sidewalk on its southern side heading east towards the Galleria of Mount Lebanon and Route 19, but not on the side near Timber Creek. There was a pedestrian crosswalk near Timber Creek that was once connecting both sides of Gilkinson, but it was removed during the State Department of Transportation Improvement Project. And my understanding is that Mount Lebanon did request PennDOT to study it to see if a crosswalk could be put back in, and was told no to that request. The Gilkinson has a 35-mile-per-hour speed limit, as you're aware. The cars speed through that stretch of Gilkinson because it's just a wide open strip. Heading west towards Painter's Run, there have been numerous accidents that have occurred at that intersection of Timber Creek and Old Gilkinson entrance. So now with the steps being built, and there's currently no sidewalk on that side of Gilkinson to access the stairs, what can you tell me that the township might consider regarding safety of the pedestrians, mainly the children that would be crossing the road there, and also in concern of the traffic and the amount of speeding that goes on? And with that, I'll pause. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It is a state road. And it's a 4-lane state road, and that's why they didn't want to do a mid-block crossing, is my assumption. But I would just let you know that the active transportation plan is going to look at all streets. The comprehensive plan looked at road volume and vehicle volume, and Gilkinson is well below the thresholds for a road diet. So that's all. I mean, there's opportunity for change, but I don't think it's on any priority list right now.
So, yeah, so from a commission perspective, and it's been a little while since we've had this conversation, I would say Commissioner Silverman was very interested in getting these steps reinstalled. He worked at this for quite a while because he said many residents were very interested in having those steps replaced. But we do recognize that Gilkinson is not a pedestrian-friendly road, and I personally would not want to see a crosswalk back there. I don't think that it's safe. I will tell you personally, I ride my bike down Gilkinson when I try to go to Trader Joe's, and it is a scary experience. Yeah.
What are you doing?
It's the only way I can get there.
I know.
But so I think that, you know, again, the sidewalk or the steps were, yeah, a step in this process, I think, partly to allow people from Old Gilkinson to go up and walk. So hopefully they would be walking along Old Gilkinson, not crossing, because there really isn't a good option for the municipality at this point, short of having long, exhaustive conversations with PennDOT about how to truly restructure that entire road, and I don't see that happening anytime soon. So I think it's going to be more a question of how do we discourage people from walking across Gilkinson, given the steps, rather than trying to encourage a certain place. But that's just me, and I'm not an engineer.
Yes, understood. Is there, and thank you, it's been great to be able to sit in on this and to hear the work that you're doing at Scrubgrass. Would there be an opportunity possibly to have something that indicates the speed that someone is going? I mean, Gilkinson's 35, but I can tell you it's easily people are hitting 50 and 60 as they're coming past our entrance.
Can we put up the reminders on Gilkison or is it PennDOT?
No, you can't.
Concept, so yes, the engineer says yes, it is something that could be considered.
That would be great. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
All right,
All right.
yeah, we'll, again, it's a street that we're all very aware of. And definitely see if that's something that we can't get on the list.
Well, I didn't want to have people come and attend and not be able to speak, but kind of returning at the issue or agenda item at hand, scrubgrass. As we see it, I think, do we need to make a motion to send it through? I would make that motion.
So I would.
So I think we need to define what.
Spell out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
And I can help.
Pick, just make a motion.
So I would make a motion to accept all of the recommendations, including the bump out of the intersection area, temporary. And I would like to see some speed collection data be part of the project.
Yes. Post project.
Ongoing.
Yep. I would second that. Any other discussion of scrubgrass? All in favor?
Alright.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion passes. With that, I want to announce our next meeting date and time. Be mindful that it is Monday, November 4th at 6 p.m. due to the election on Tuesday, November 5th. Anyone make a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Nobody's opposed. Good night, everyone. Thank you so much for